Hello Year 5, welcome to Friday's English lesson where we are looking at embedded clauses just like we looked at yesterday and whether or not we can punctuate them correctly. Alright, so can I punctuate embedded clauses correctly? Here is a little example one that I made earlier. Hi, I'm Miss Rutherford. Today I'm going to be teaching you about embedded clauses and here's one I made earlier. Mrs. Elmore, moving stealthily across the classroom, began to do a jazzy dance, very on brand for Mrs. Elmore. Now you can tell that this is an embedded clause because, how can you tell? Pause me if you need to have a think. What specific thing makes it an embedded clause? Get my pen up. Did you spot my comma bread from my sandwich? My embedded clause is here and it's got a comma on either side of it. Now it's got a comma on either side because to be an embedded clause it's got to be in the middle of the sentence. So I've got Mrs. Elmore to open my sentence. Then I've got my embedded clause moving stealthily across the classroom. Began to do a jazzy dance at the end. Now I can double check that it is in fact an embedded clause and that it still makes sense. I say, oh, Mrs. Elmore began to do a jazzy dance. Yes, she did. But before she did that, she moved stealthily across the classroom. So to recap, it's embedded because it's in the middle of our sentence and it's got our comma bread on either side. All right, let's go on to the next page. Okay, your turn. I want you to pause me. Have a go and see if you can work out what's wrong with these sentences. Have a look at what words are used, what words might be missing. Have a look at that punctuation and have a think about what might be missing from these or you might need to add in. It always helps me to read them aloud. Okay, then let's have a look at the first one, the blue sentence. Florida was beginning to scream, looked like a maniac. Now, if we took out the clause in the middle, it does say Florida looked like a maniac. So it is technically still making sense. However, this bit in the middle, the clause doesn't make sense. Florida was beginning to scream, looked like a maniac. We're missing a key word there, which is not only going to make it an embedded clause, but it will also make it a relative embedded clause because it's got one of our relative words in. Did you get this one? Now add in Florida, who was beginning to scream, looked like a maniac. Now it's a correctly punctuated embedded clause. Okay, Liam and Florida bickered like mad, began to look suspicious. Ooh. Liam and Florida bickered like mad makes sense. And Liam and Florida began to look suspicious makes sense. But what's wrong with this little bit in the middle? What's wrong with it all together? Liam and Florida bickered like mad, began to look suspicious. How can we change it so that we can still keep an embedded clause in the middle? Did you spot that the tense is wrong here? Liam and Florida bickering like mad began to look suspicious. Now it's not a relative clause here. However, we could change it into one. Let me do a nice copy and paste jobby. I could change it to Liam and Florida, who bickered like mad, began to look suspicious. But I think I prefer the first one, Liam and Florida bickering like mad, began to look suspicious. Okay, what's wrong with this one? The red sentence. In Liverpool, they got in lots of trouble. Now I've got my comma breads, I've got two commas and I've got a bit in the middle. However, if I took out that comma sandwich in the middle there, in Liverpool, in lots of trouble, doesn't make sense. In Liverpool, they got in lots of trouble makes sense. It's not an embedded clause though. In Liverpool, they got in lots of trouble is just a sentence. Okay, it is not an embedded clause because it's not in the middle. It doesn't make sense if we take it out. Okay, the young chap, as fast as he could, tried to stop her screaming. Now, this is not a relative clause because we don't have one of our magic relative words. However, It is an embedded clause. It's just missing something. What is it missing? It's missing its other slice of bread. At the moment, it's an open sandwich. At the moment, it's jam on toast. It's not a jam sandwich. So how can we fix it? Where do we need to put my comma in? The young chap, comma, as fast as he could, comma, tried to stop her screaming. Now we can double check that this is an embedded clause by taking out that sandwich. And now it reads, the young chap tried to stop her screaming, which is true. That does make sense. However, we can add in extra information. The young chap is trying to stop her screaming, but he's doing it as fast as he can, which tells our reader that he is super, super anxious to get her to stop screaming. Well done if you spotted those mistakes. Let's go on to the next page. Okay, now this is an I do. This is my retelling of the plane journey from Florida's point of view. Have a listen. As we got on the plane, which was incredibly fancy, I could hardly believe my luck. David Beckham, plus any other celebrity for that matter, would look totally at home on this jet. Liam was babbling on to Eddie Xanadu, one of the other parents, or another one of the parents, and trying to act dadly. I busied myself taking selfies, including all my new merch from Draxworld, before trying to upload them to my iCloud. Then I realised I wouldn't get service up in the air. What a total nightmare. Okay, I feel like that's very Florida-y. Can you spot the embedded clauses that I put in there, and can you spot the punctuation I used to help me? Okay, best thing to look for is those sandwich commas. I'm going to find them. You can pause me and challenge yourself, or you can find them along with me. As we got on the plane, comma, which was incredibly fancy, comma, I could hardly believe my luck. Now this one is a relative embedded clause because it's got one of our relative words. Okay, as we got on the plane, I could hardly believe my luck. Let's add some more detail. As we got on the plane, which was incredibly fancy, I could hardly believe my luck. David Beckham, plus any other celebrity for that matter, would look totally at home on this jet. So we've got my commas. Now, is this one a relative embedded clause or just an embedded clause? Does it have one of our special relative words? But it is an embedded clause because it's sandwiched in the middle of our sentence that makes sense without it. David Beckham would look totally at home on this jet. Okay, let's find the next one. Liam was babbling on to Eddie Xanadu, another one of the parents, and trying to act dadly. Now we found our comma bread, take it out. Liam was babbling on to Eddie Xanadu and trying to act dadly. Does make sense, but I've got some extra information telling me who Eddie Xanadu is. He's another one of the parents. Now, is it a relative clause or is it an embedded clause? You are correct, it's an embedded clause because we don't have any of those relative words. Okay, I busied myself taking selfies, comma, there we go, including all my new merch from Draxworld, comma, before trying to upload them to my iCloud. So I've got my embedded clause there because if I took that out, it would say, I busied myself taking selfies before trying to upload them to my iCloud. But I've added extra information. I want to show off all about my new Drax merch. I am very cool. Okay, then I realised I wouldn't get service up in the air. What a total nightmare. Now, does that one have an embedded clause? Nope, it does not. Good spot, guys, if you manage to find all of those. Let's go on to the next page. Okay, we do. Write the next two lines of Florida's recount using a relative embedded clause and an embedded clause. Remember the comma sandwich, okay? So what I want you to do is pause me here, have a go at writing one with a relative embedded clause and an embedded clause. I'm going to pause me too, and then I will show you my sentences and see how close they are to yours. Okay guys, here are my sentences, my next two lines that I've written. You can see that I've got my commas and I've used a relative embedded clause and then an embedded clause after that. Let me read it out to you. After what felt like 4 hours, the jet, which was starting to get boring anyway, began to go down. The air steward, wearing a deep blue Drax uniform, asked us to sit down and buckle our belts for landing. Okay, so now it's your turn. Have a look at the 2 lines that you did. Did you remember your comma sandwich? Did you remember to use one relative clause and one non-relative embedded clause? Have a look and see if you need to edit those 2 lines, and then it's on to you writing your own version of Florida's recount. So you can have a look back at the waggle that I started before, and you can magpie 1 line from that if you are struggling to get started. But I want to know how you thought Florida felt on the plane. So you can write about how she was feeling on the plane, what happened when they landed, and what happened when she realised that Liam had tricked her and they were actually in China. If you remember back to our video yesterday, we read up to the point where she realised they were in China and she had a screaming fight with Liam, and then he managed to calm her down by getting her to go and pose for a photograph, which she thinks is for a newspaper, a magazine, or even better, the TV. Okay, use your skill ladder to help you. Okay, it says, can I use our comma sandwich correctly? Can I use relative embedded clauses? And can I use embedded clauses? So remember those relative words to use. Try and use lots of different ones. Don't just stick to who and which. Try and use lots of different ones if you can. I would like you to tally them as you go to keep track. Have fun writing today, guys, and I will see you for Monday's video next week.